Adam Warlock is a very awesome character. However, there has been a ton of debate about this champion. Some people think that he is like the new Cosmic Beyond God tier, and some people think that he is just some overrated garbage. Well, I have a rank 5 Adam Warlock, so I feel like I can comment on this situation pretty well. Hence why we have this review today. So we have some topics here. We have his DPS and utility strengths. We have his constant evaluation in war, battlegrounds, and questing. We have his cons and weaknesses. And then we have his overall rating. So let's just not waste any time and let's just get started. Adam Warlock is a standard raw damage DPS. He has massive precision and furies that he gains as he builds his sovereignty counter. He also has a true damage buff that lets him ignore pretty much every resistance out there, so his damage output is pretty much very hard to reduce, and he also cannot be nullified, so there is very few ways to minimize this champion's damage output. Let's put this to the test. Here we have this Iron Man that has Oscillate, which gives Iron Man a very massive armor up and crit res buff, so true damage should bypass all of that, right? And it does, it really does, and it's very strong. So check this out. We have to just play slow here first because he just becomes ultra aggressive. But after this, we can just go back in. We can start the counter and you're going to see that the true damage is just so useful. Now check this out. We just do not care. We're just doing our regular damage output, even though he has a bunch of armor up on him now. That is just a really solid ability, and it just makes his damage output very hard to bypass. You just cannot reduce it pretty much because the true damage is just that strong. So here we drop the SP2 and the fight is just pretty much over now. Very clean there, and it's just a great showing of his damage output. Now this man has a lot of utility. He has access to Unblockable, which just allows for some very easy openings and a very strong auto block counter. He has access to a taunt while the counter is active, which lets him just be so good at controlling the fight, and it just makes the opponent even more aggressive. The stasis pod is just so strong. It bypasses a lot of damage sources, for example Hurt Locker, Gallon's Harvest. It just reduces the damage of it by a ton. It also reduces the damage of basic hits as well, and whenever you activate the stasis pod manually, you activate a 60-second energy protection buff, which gives him immunity to Frostbite, Cold Snap, Shock, and Incinerate. It also gives him a stun whenever the opponent touches a stasis pod, so it gives him a very nice way to get some more openings. Just overall, an insanely strong ability. Let's check out this Freezer Burn lane here, and this is just a pretty annoying node because it just gives you a bunch of Cold Snap, Incinerate. It is just not a fun time. However, Adam Warlock here is just immune to it all. We go for the stasis pod activation and we get a 60-second energy protection buff. This is just massive because it just ignores pretty much every damage over time effect that is energy based. And we have it for about 60 seconds. And the best part is, Adam Warlock is an insane DPS. So we can just use that 60 seconds to just straight up down the opponent. It is just a very nice time. And Adam Warlock is just great for a ton of energy-based damage over time fights. However, there is one downside to this, but we'll get to that later. But for now, just witness how strong he is in this matchup here. We go back in, we drop our combo to activate the sovereignty counter, and things are just looking pretty good for us. And yeah, the damage output's also looking pretty sweet as well, but like this is the utility part, but it still can't even like ignore the damage. It is just so strong. 29,000 medium there and a very clean fight overall. Now we have this Rocket Raccoon, and this is a good showing of his auto block counter. So this is the, I believe it is called Gimme Shelter lane, which gives Rocket Raccoon a pretty big auto block, but we can just bypass it with the Unblockable. Here we activate the pod for an easy opening, and now it is just time to go straight in. And Rocket Raccoon will not auto block once in this fight because the Unblockable is just so potent, and it's just there for pretty much the entire time. Here I dropped the SP1 as a safety net, and the fight is now pretty much over after this SP1 right here. So a very clean fight overall, a very just cheesy time to be honest. And now we have his sovereignty buff, and this grants him immunity to ability accuracy reduction, nullify, fate seal, and stagger. This is just so strong. It lets him take Rintra, Doctor Doom, Domino, you name it. Just any hard defender, he can just take with ease because of the sovereignty buff. It is such a nice time, and additionally, if he's awakened, every time you activate the stasis pod, you get a pretty massive regen as well, so he becomes a great quester overall. This man just has a ton of utility. Now let's see him in some content. So in Alliance War, he works very, very well, especially with a power back boost, because at that point, you can just raw damage through pretty much any fight or lane, and ideally you want to have a lot of experience with him so you can just minimize the AI reliance. And it's the same case for Battlegrounds as well. He can do a ton of fights there, like even the hard ones, for example Domino, I think Dr. Doom even, I've taken before. He can just do a ton of fights in Battlegrounds, but you want to be very good with him to minimize the AI reliance. But once you get that down, he just becomes insane on both attack and on defense. He is just really annoying too. He always just gets a lot of wins for me on both the attack and defense spectrum. And he is a great quester as well. He has a lot of cosmic tropes, for example, having a ton of buffs, having an auto block counter, and additionally he has some pretty great immunities as well, so he can take a lot of different lanes in that regard. And he can also just be a great quester because of his sustainability. His stasis pod gives him a massive regen, so it lets him survive like in a quest for a very long time. Just overall a great quester as well. Now let's check out this cosmic lane right here. This is an Iceman on it, and Iceman gives you a massive cold snap right when he's awakened. But check this out, we drop the pod immediately, we purify it, and now we are just immune to cold snap for the rest of the fight pretty much. And we also got a great regen there as well, so it is just a very sweet time. And he just has a ton of ways to counter this fight. He has a ton of buffs to bypass the miss. He also has the energy protection buff. He just has a lot of ways to deal with this Iceman right here. And yeah, the mediums are looking pretty solid now. We're just doing 30,000 there just like that. We dropped the relic that does 75,000 in total. And yeah, this fight is just pretty much over now. We drop the SP2 and we get a nice crit there that gets capped because of the ice armor. And now we have this Battlegrounds fight. This one's very old and I apologize for that, but my Adam Warlock is probably my third most banned champion out there besides my rank 2 Silk, and I think probably my Moondragon as well. But when he isn't banned, he is just so strong. Like, check this out. This is from, like I said, a pretty old meta. I think it was about 1 season ago, but he still just does it with absolute ease. He is so strong in this regard. I know the quality is a bit low, but that's my apologies. But hey, it's still some Battlegrounds gameplay, right? But like the damage output, the burst is just so strong. But unfortunately, Iron Man has a pretty massive regen that we can't even throw a special attack during it, which is pretty annoying. But yeah, we're still doing this fight very, very well. We are just in absolute control here. And once you master Adam Warlock, you are just always in control. And that's the best part. Like, that is just such a nice time. And yeah, this fight is pretty much over. Now let's talk about the cons of this champion. And there's only 2, but one of them is just talked about so much, and it is the fact that he does have some AI reliance. But here's the thing. Once you master Adam Warlock, there is very little AI reliance, because there are a ton of ways to just make sure that the opponent will always be aggressive, or you can just always maintain your counter. For example, there's relic stuns, there is the SP1, the SP2, the stasis pod activation manually. There are a lot of ways to just maintain your sovereignty counter and to just keep the AI aggressive, or just, keep control of the fight. And once you learn that, then he'll become much less AI reliant, right? So just keep that in mind. However, there is still some, like, even when you master him, so that is like a bit of a weakness for him. But besides that, it really isn't as bad as people say. And next up, this is for the future. This is a future con. But so his energy protection buff is only 60 seconds long, and that is still very good, but eventually over time the health pools will be too high for him to take the fight in one go. He would just probably run out of his energy protection buff, and that would just be enough on time. However, that's not for a while, to be honest. And additionally, in Battlegrounds and Alliance War, it is no issue there at all. So it's just a minor con, but just keep in mind that it might happen someday. So here's an example of some bad Adam Warlock gameplay. This is what you want to not do. Like, you want to avoid doing this. So check this out. I go in, I start the counter, and then I try to intercept him, but then I get clipped. And I have to restart the counter now, and it's just not a fun time. But here's what to do. So I go in after, like, the fight starts, and check this out. So I go in, I try to start the counter now, and here's what I do differently. I activate the pod manually, and that gives me a stun to just go in ASAP, and he is now over bar power, which just makes him ultra aggressive, and he drops the SP1, and now we're just in control completely. There I can just go back in, and if he was passive there, I could just drop the SP1 there, or just drop the SP2 eventually. But yeah, this is how you want to play Adam Warlock. This is the safer way of playing him, like no intercepts needed, just a very safe time overall. Overall, this guy is just super strong. He has the damage, he has the control, he has the utility, he has some defensive use too even. He just has it all pretty much. There are some cons, but one con can be prevented if you just master him and like utilize his mechanics properly. And the other con, we haven't really seen in action yet, right? So my overall rating for Adam Warlock is an 8.9 out of 10, and in a T0 to tier 5 scaling, that is a top of tier 1 placement. And I'm just being cautious here, right? But I think eventually he'll go to the 9.0 or T0 listing. But for now, I just want to, play it safe. But I think he is a very strong champion, and he will just keep on shining in this game. And yeah, 8.9 is still the highest so far in this feature crystal, but maybe one champion will match him, right? But more on that later. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on Adam Warlock. I feel like he just has everything that you want for a champion. And yeah, that's about it for me.